So these were three more recent, super significant events. And the value of it was that if these things hadn't happened, I would not have been forced to dive as deeply as I did into my psyche. I suspect the enormous and very challenging gift that came out of it is that I am much more aware of who I really am.
Amanda Gore, welcome, and thank you so much for joining Joe and I today in conversation.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. Hello, Joe. Hello, Anne.
Amanda, to kick off, what we'd really like to dig deep into today is a key challenge or event that's happened in your life that you found very significant, and why was it so significant?
I came up with actually two. These are two significant events. And the first one was COVID, like it was for many, many people. But when you're a speaker and your entire life is traveling on planes to different states and different countries, COVID was like hitting a brick wall at approximately 1 million miles an hour, going blah and sliding down it. And what I discovered through the pain of the whole thing was that I actually didn't have a life. I was just working. And I had a house, but I didn't have a home. It was a really big wake-up call for me to realize how much I had escaped into working all the time. You know, I'm a speaker on joy, and one of the core things that I've talked about is the fears, the subconscious fears that become the unconscious drivers of our behavior. So, you know, I'm flying around, I'm talking about joy, I'm talking about fears, and then COVID, boom. And it was a very deep time of reflection, I must say. So that was extremely difficult. And in the middle of it all, I fell madly in love with the man I thought was the man of my dreams. This is the second one. I actually have three. The second one, after about 9 months of probably 1 million clues, all of which I chose not to look at, saw them, but chose not to look at them, I got a phone call with him sobbing, saying he was really sorry, but he'd actually been, you know, having flings with 3 women and he was in love with another one. So that, at the age of 60, I think I was 67, and I thought, oh my God, I've fallen in love. It's so wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And then boom. So that was another very serious personal growth and development time that both of those things prepared me for the journey to the States, which is the third huge thing. So when you're 68 and you move countries, so I sold everything, didn't even bother doing it half-heartedly, which in retrospect, I actually think I should not have rushed so much, but too late to reflect on things, and moved to a country where I had been before, but moved to a place I had never lived and only knew 2 people and didn't like that place in the end. So then I moved to Virginia Beach, which was about a 3-hour drive away. Again, that was moving to a place where I only knew the real estate agent. And that, at the age of 70, has been an enormous struggle.
Wow.
But if we go past that to what's the value of it, was that if these things hadn't happened, I would not have been forced to dive as deeply as I did into my psyche, into my soul, to work out, why am I here? What am I doing? What do I want to do? What matters to me? All of those burning questions that I suspect many of your listeners will at some stage in their lives reflect on. Usually, you know, you don't deal with them unless a crisis happens. Most humans, we just truck along and then some crisis happens. So, you know, COVID, fall in love, get dumped, or move country, and you don't know anybody. And you've got to start again. So all 3 of them forced me to dive deep. And I suspect the enormous and very challenging gift that came out of it is that I am much more aware of who I really am. It's been a big journey to that. And most people might be listening to this thinking, oh, gee, she's 70. Who'd she think she was? Well, truthfully, I don't think I thought about it much because I was too busy working.
Really good point. And I'd love just to pause here for a moment and ask you, in reflection of who you were pre those three major events in your life versus who you are to now, can you describe that?
It's a really good question. I would say beforehand, I completely discounted myself, my needs, and I was living out a life that was my business persona. So, 9 billion people have imposter syndrome or walk around feeling like they've got imposter syndrome. I wasn't conscious of it. And I've never really worried too much what other people think about me. But what I did learn is that the core fears that I picked up by the time I was 7 had ruled my life so elegantly that I had no clue how to be safe. And I knew I had one of the core fears. Let me share with you the 3 core fears because that will make better sense of the answer.
Yeah, please.
So epigenetics shows us that by the time we're 7, most of these core fears are embedded by us. So they're not embedded by other people. They're embedded by us. As toddlers, we tell ourselves a story based on how we perceive what's going on around us. And of course, toddlers don't have the capacity to, if mummy yells at them, daddy yells at them, they don't look at mummy and daddy and go, oh, mummy, daddy, I know you're exhausted because I haven't slept for 3 weeks and nor have you. I know you love me. You're just yelling. That doesn't happen. It goes, they don't love me. I'm not good enough, because there's the first one. I'm not worth loving. I'm not good enough. The second one is I'm unsafe in some way. Very common with alcoholic parents. I had that. I, by the way, got the trifecta. And then the third one is a fear of separation. So it's I don't belong, I don't fit in. And those were kind of given to me. They just fell out of my mouth one day while I was speaking on stage. And that was many years ago now. And it's formed the basis for pretty much everything because almost every adult is a toddler walking around in a grown-up body. So that was a very long way of saying, I feel like up until these events, I was an equally unconscious toddler walking around in a grown-up body. Now I'm much more capable of being the adult to that child and recognizing the fears when they kick in and choosing not to let them influence my decisions. Because any decision you make with fear attached to it will bite you on the ass. And the trouble is, the fears are sneaky. You start to peel away the obvious parts, and then you've really got to stop before you make a decision and think, wait, is there an element of fear anywhere in this? Maybe 3 months ago, I work with a woman in New Zealand. I was working with Michelle, even after all the work I've done. Oh, wait, the 4-year-old is terrified. Because I had an alcoholic father. We lived in India. My mother left for a year, and I didn't find out till she died. And then I was molested at some stage while we were in India. So that kind of set the scene for me to carry all of those fears. But particularly, it wasn't just feeling unsafe, it was terror.
Wow.
When she said it, I was really disappointed. I thought, oh, God, I've worked on myself so hard for so long, since I was 21, really, so I must be a very slow learner. I realised we were getting right down to the core of the onion layers. So life is a lot more pleasant when you're not constantly terrified and you're aware that that's how you used to be. So I wouldn't say I've turned into, a super self-confident, courageous Hulk, but I'm way better than I was.
So it sounds like, Amanda, over those years, you developed all these techniques and skills and tools to become this person that didn't need to dig deep into the fears and didn't need to face the fears. And you had this persona that was strong and vibrant and doing well and felt like I don't have fears. I don't need to face them. I feel fearless.
Oh, no. A lot of people would say that. I always knew, Jo, that there were patterns in my life that were demonstrating I hadn't sorted everything out. The only fear that I had really been conscious of since I was in my 20s was that I wasn't worth loving. But I was only conscious of that because I struggled so much in relationships. I was trying to do the work on myself to be better at relationships. It took longer to have this consciousness of the fear of feeling unsafe and of not belonging or fitting in. I've never really felt like I fitted in. I had lots and lots of different groups of friends, and I could sort of drop into one and another, but there wasn't a homogenous one. Again, that ties back to my childhood, because one of the things I was told very early on that I was extraordinarily good at was building rapport with people. And after I was told that, I started to notice it, and I can. I mean, I can be somebody's best friend in nanoseconds a lot of the time, but I was a chameleon because I had to be that when I was little to keep everybody happy, you know, alcoholic dad, unhappy mum. And I was never really myself, Jo, I'd say.
So perhaps you were
these-
creating that safety for yourself, Amanda. If I can make connections with others and build rapport, then I can create a world where I feel safe.
See, if you build rapport with people, you can go to all sorts of different groups and different types of people, and you get in, you fit in, but you're very rarely yourself. Whereas the catch-22 to that is, if you really know who you are and you're authentically that person, rapport happens anyway. You don't have to consciously build it. When you're driven by those core unconscious beliefs, which is what those fears are, then it was a 100% safety mechanism. And at the same time, it was a really useful skill to develop. So I'd like to say I had more consciousness around that, but I don't think I did, Jo.
But I'm curious for Anne's, leading on to Anne's question, compared to you before and you afterwards, or you now, the difference and how you are able to be more authentic on the other side of those three distinct challenges.
That's a great question, because I always thought I was authentic. When I first started speaking, I met some very famous people who were fantastic on stage and like psychos off stage. There wasn't a match at all between what I saw on stage and what was off stage. And I vowed and declared I would never be like that I would be the same on stage as off stage. But I think what happened was that I took the on stage persona and put it into Amanda. So I always believed I was authentic, and I was to that. I've always been honest and open with people. And authentic's an interesting word, because what are you being authentic to? So I was authentic to my onstage persona. Now I'm hopeful that because I'm more conscious of who I really am without the fears, and I'm managing to hold that a bit better, the real me is able to be present. I've been working on how to be present, because when you're riddled with fear, you're almost never present. You're on hyper alert. It's like, is everybody happy? I build rapport with that one and make that one happy over there. And this had happened in the past. I don't want this to happen again. Or, oh my God, I've done something and that'll upset the future. So when you're not very present, it's difficult to be authentic and to pay more attention to feelings. Yeah. I heard a professor years ago, John Duradini. He was a professor of psychiatry, and he said life is not about feeling good. It's about being good at feeling.
Interesting point there, Amanda, about feeling, because we've segregated feelings into two classes. You say that you speak a lot on joy, and that's what everybody wants. They want joy in their life. And all of those so-called good feelings we want more of, and all of those so-called feelings that make us squeamy in the tummy or not quite happy to be in that state, we want to shove away as quickly as possible. And I'm interested to know how you navigate those feelings in their entirety now. So the moments of joy, along with the moments that you're feeling really, oh, I don't know that I'm happy with that feeling. Don't know if I want to go there.
I wouldn't claim to have mastered that yet, Anne, but the first job I had to do was to feel, to be aware I was feeling and notice what I was feeling, because I didn't. I just kept moving. And I had a general idea that I felt miserable. I rarely felt joy. That was the other joke. Here I was speaking about joy, and I was miserable. So that didn't play out too well in how authenticity was. I was genuine in my desire to help people find it, but I hadn't found much of it myself, or not consciously. So once I started working on feeling and then acknowledging the feelings, I've found a way to just acknowledge the feelings that are not so good and just allow them to be there and not judge them. Because I think I'm learning that we judge the feelings. That's the, oh, I want more joy, but that feeling sucks. Whereas it's almost as if we're crucibles. The human being is a crucible where we put in those feelings, and if we don't allow that misery to consume us, but we just sit with it and we can observe it, feel it, but don't hang in it there too long, observe it and neither accept nor reject. So either of those is a judgment. And then if we wait a little while, our being processes it and transmutes it. Is when we shove it down, shove it down, shove it down, and don't deal with it and don't look at it, that I suspect it goes down and creates havoc with our physiology, which we know. Almost every disease we get is based in some kind of emotional, fear-based something.
Mm.
People don't like to admit it, but almost all of them are. And, you know, my background in physiotherapy reinforced that as well. Even sprains and strains, often they're an indicator to someone they're doing too much, they're not resting enough, they're not treating themselves well, they're rushing, they're not taking time to slow down, relax. You can almost always tie it back to something that's going on in their lives.
Mm. The thing that is really worthy of commenting on there, you're talking a lot about the distinction between when we just constantly listen to our head, the shoulds, the shouldn'ts, the do's, the don'ts, the rights, the wrongs, all of those paradigms that keep going and forgetting to go into, well, what am I actually feeling right now? Where's my heart in all of this and what do I need to address? On that basis, how have you learnt to move from the head to the heart to start to feel?
Well, here's the sad part. I wrote it in my book 10, 12 years ago. So I had this vision. Did I do it? No. My business was called Head to Heart. I had this process in my book, but I never did it because I just didn't think about it. And it's only in the last, since COVID, that I've managed to be far more conscious of being in my heart, particularly the last 12 months, and finding the space and peace that's in there. Now, I would love to tell you that I'm in my heart all the time and life is just blissful, but I'm not. But I now can say, oh, I notice I'm disturbed. I feel off. I'm not aligned. I'm not centered. Time to stop for a minute, get into my heart and calm down. And then that seems to calm the other stuff down. Now, I've been reading a whole series of books by a man called Paul Selig, and he channels guides who are called Melchizedek, I think. And I actually love these books because there are such nuggets in all of them. And one of the things they say, which resonated so much, was that when you think, there's always fear attached.
Ah,
When you know from your heart or your gut, because both of them have neurons as well, when you know, there's no fear. So a gift is to start to pay attention to the difference between thinking and knowing, and trying to use discernment based on feeling. Because almost always if you think and there's fear attached, you will feel anxious or agitated or something's not right. But when you go into your heart and you know something's right, there is no fear. There's a kind of a peace that happens, even if it's a horrible decision, like knowing I was going to move to the States.
That was my question, Amanda. How has that played out for you? How has that shown up in your life when you've been able to move from your head?
Well, once again, I'd love to say I've used that so much with such consciousness, but it's really only by chance prior to being here and being so lonely, so desperate, so miserable, so isolated, so disconnected that I had to dive deeper. Prior to doing all of that, I had a very good friend who suggested I come back. And the first time he said it, I went, no, I live in paradise. And then he said it again. And he's not the sort of person who says a thing twice without you having to think seriously about it. So I thought, oh, bugger. So I was sitting down and I didn't know what to do. I had no clue. I couldn't sort myself out. So I sat on my balcony one day and basically shouted at the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. And what am I going to do? And then I heard loud and clear, but no voice, do you want to play big or small? And I had no clue what that meant, but I knew I was moving. Now, I didn't want to. It wasn't fun. It's not something that I would have said excites me, so go do it. It was torture, really. And I wouldn't have done it unless I had that, do you want to play big or small? I think what playing big or small now means, because I had no clue what it meant, is for me to find me.
Wow.
So it wasn't to be big out on stage, because that's what I thought it would mean. And I'd be reaching far more people over here than I would in Australia. But I actually think it was about me stepping into me and finding out who I am. So I don't know how big that is, but I suspect that's why I did it. And I suspect for most people, because we're all fractals of God, really, I'll just throw that in. For most people, if you do the hard yards or begin the journey to know who you really are, to know yourself, you're all astonishing beings of light. We are not just a lump of flesh and bones and skin. You know, we're all spiritual beings embodied in a body. But very few of us get to the point where we find that. We're all astonishing beings of light. I do this with corporate groups. I have them look at each other and say, you're an astonishing, because you know, when the egg hits the sperm or the sperm hits the egg, there's actually a flash of light.
Mm.
The chemists say it's zinc, but I like to say that's you coming in. So see, you're all astonishing beings of light and love. And our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to become emissaries of the love that we really are.
I think this is a really interesting point, because if we look at the world today, just not even ourselves, but the whole world, and the turmoil that's going around globally, it's all based on fear. People that perceive that they have power over others, either through wars or through the way in which they're operating. And to me, it's a really important time to say, well, do I want to be caught in that fear? So if we can look at it globally and ask ourselves the question, do we want to be caught in the global fear, or do we want to spend more time, I'm going to be kind to myself and my neighbours?
Yep. I wouldn't say we can't do anything by working locally.
Mm.
So, you know, I studied quantum physics since I was 17, back in the day when it was brand new, and we're all connected.
Mm.
And a lot of that fear that you're talking about that's out there is a collective field of fear that we all feel.
Mm.
And if enough of us come together in small groups or even individually, and we choose not to buy into that fear, but we choose to tap into ourselves and our hearts and align, and then be an emissary of love, kind to our neighbours, kind to the people at school, kind to the people at work, And it doesn't mean you're a walkover where you just let everybody tromp over you, because love yourself as well. I'm working on that one too. But if you change yourself, you change the field around you, the field around your community. And if enough people do that, we will change the collective. But we have to connect, and we have to recognize that that is a really powerful way to contribute to changing the way the world is right now.
Absolutely. Amanda, going back to your sitting on the balcony and saying to the universe, God, what am I meant to be doing? And it came back and said, do you want to be big or small? You're working in the corporate sector, you're working with lots of people. How is that bigness showing up for you in the sense of how you're delivering what you're delivering?
That's a great question, Anne. It's very interesting. How I am on stage now ostensibly looks the same, but feels very different to me, because once upon a time I could prepare. So now I still have a rough idea of what I'm going to say. But more often than not, I don't even know what's going to come out of my mouth as I'm walking up to the stage. And yet, it's almost as if I'm channeling on stage, because the words just come out of my mouth. And quite often I'll think, wow, that was great. Where'd that come from? While I'm speaking. And I never do the same thing twice. And I can't remember much at the end of it. I feel like because I am more centered and in my heart, and I consciously do it before I go on stage, that I emanate a different frequency, and that holds the space. So I also studied Qigong for about 7 years. And one of the things with Qigong is that if you teach Qigong, you set the field, the Qi field, they call it. So I feel like what's happened is because I've changed my frequency and I'm more in my heart and grounded, then what I do is create the field by being very present on stage. And that allows everyone in the field to change if they want to. It creates a safe space in which they can look at things differently, in which they can laugh at themselves and connect with the people on either side of them and break down barriers. I create this safe experience for people to have where they lose that fear, they drop the embarrassment factor, and they just connect. And I talk about love in the corporate world too. Just because it's the corporate world, you're still dealing with humans. And every human wants to be seen, valued, heard, acknowledged, loved, cared for. We're no different.
You are showing up differently, or you are showing up more within your authentic self.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the feedback from audiences, as an example, from pre and now?
It's a great question again, Anne. Beforehand, humour was an enormous part of what I did. So people would be hysterically laughing the whole time. But that was back in the day when you could speak a little more openly and there wasn't so many, I'm going to get offended if you say that. Whereas now, I don't feel like I'm nearly as funny. But people still say, that was so funny. But I feel like there's more profound messages coming through. The responses I'm getting, you can tell people are reflecting more deeply. I've always had people coming up wanting to hug me because they wanted some of my energy, but COVID kind of killed that a bit. But people are still talking about the energy. That I think the feedback I get now is a little more meaningful. They talk a bit more about their relationships or their relationship with their children or some challenge they've had. So they're connecting well. And my goal anyway is to have them do what Lao Tzu said. Lao Tzu said, when the teacher is done, the students will say, we've done it ourselves. My real goal is to create that field in which they can make whatever change they choose to make or need to make. And it's so integrated by the time they leave that they say, wow, that reminded me of so many things that I haven't been doing. Whereas I know I've actually taught them quite a lot of new stuff, but it's embedded so well. And some of it, of course, is a reminder of what they already knew. but they're shifting in it and they're making more differences afterwards.
Amanda, that we do already know, we just don't listen to it?
We know a lot, and if we talk to our hearts, which is connected to our higher self, the wise counsel we all have, whatever you want to call it, we do know everything. We just don't tap into it. So sometimes it's helpful to have someone else come along and go, oh, look at this really obvious thing that you haven't been looking at for the last 10 years. And you've had 27 other people say this to you, but there's a random stranger on stage going, oh, look at this. And then you go, oh, yeah, should do that. But if we just sat and quietly tuned into ourselves, most of us know the answers to most things.
I wonder, Amanda, if creating a space or a field where people can connect, was that the same intention that you had pre-COVID before you learned to connect yourself?
Very early in my career, Ron Tacky was my original mentor. And I was so passionate about what I was talking about because I started off in wellness. So I would talk to people about wellness and stress. And I was, if you just do these things, you won't get sick and you won't have pain and you blah, blah, blah. And he said to me one day, stop being a missionary. And what do you mean? I'm not a missionary. He said, yes, you are. You're shoving it down people's throats and you're telling them what they need to do. So of course I walked away and go, no, I'm not. And then I realized, oh, yes, I was. And so then I moved to giving them a degustation plate. Here's all these options. Here's all these things you can do, pick and choose. And then to answer your question, Joe, I think it morphed into creating the field and creating an environment in which they could choose to make a change if they wanted to. And my job was to hold the space. I think that's developed over the last 4 or 5 years. So it's kind of gradual. It's not like a light bulb moment where it went on. It's just as I keep refining and keep developing myself, which is something for all of us. But if you keep wanting to grow and be more of who you are, most of us will do that if we're prompted by a crisis or a really bad feeling, or you get dumped in love, or something like COVID happens. If you think about it, most of us just carrying on, not even thinking about how we're living. Think me before COVID, until something massive happens. And whether it's an illness, because what do illnesses do? They suddenly make you rethink everything and start to tap into yourself and what caused this and how can I change this? Or it's a relationship breakup, or it's you lose someone you love and you start thinking again. Because until then, we're just too busy doing. And we're working and saving money to buy a house and a car and we've got children. And then unless some crisis occurs or some life event, and now you're starting to think, well, what am I doing? What's life about? I'm not happy. I'm just existing. Surely there's more to life than this. And it's that timing and experience that makes you stop and dive deeper. Did that answer your question, Joe?
It did. And I love where you're taking it, Amanda, for people to stop and pause. And perhaps for you, the process occurred throughout that pausing, the COVID and the relationship and the moving. You connected with yourself, and in the process of connecting with yourself, your intention for your workshops or your conference delegates shifted in the process of you shifting.
Well, in essence, if you change significantly, everything you do and how you do it changes. And I don't want to sound like I'm a new agey person, because this is not new age. This is just growth and development. And do you choose to grow and develop before a crisis occurs? I remember when I was 21, I read a book by Wayne Dyer, whom I had the great pleasure of meeting a couple of times, and he's a beautiful human. And it was called Your Erroneous Zones, Well, I read that book, and that was the beginning of me starting on the journey of what I feel most people will relate to, which is the journey of loving yourself. And, that's a tricky one for most people because we've always got those little fears in the background. You could never please one of the parents, or you were bullied at school because they picked up your fears. And there was a bully who also had the fears, who played out their fears in that way. You played the fears out in a different way. And the longer I live and the more I interact with people and the more I work on myself, I'm finding that if we could all actually genuinely love, if not love, then like and accept ourselves, most people's lives would improve. And most people would be kinder to each other because you're dealing with a toddler in a grown-up body, and that's a scared little toddler who wants to feel safe, who wants to think that they're special, who wants to feel special. And again, they're kind of like old hashed terms, but the truth doesn't change, does it? Can you really love somebody else if you don't actually love and accept yourself? And I'm in that process now as well. So learning how to love yourself starts with recognizing the fears. The trick is to ask yourself, what story did I tell myself? So it means one of those three core fears. Which one did you tell yourself? When did it start? So you don't have to dive in and relive every horrific detail. Just get a rough idea, because most people know. And then the third part, which my mentor David Martin gave me, is who benefited. So in my case, let's just pick one of them. I didn't feel I was worth loving because when I was 3 or 4, Mum left. And she was gone for a year, so that's a long time. And I don't remember it very consciously at all. But I do remember at some stage feeling like, well, if I'd been perfect, she wouldn't have left. If I'd kept Mummy happy, she wouldn't have left. So I took responsibility for my mother's happiness from the time I was 3 or 4 till the day she died. But I had no clue that that was the source of it. So if you ask who benefited, it wasn't me. I didn't benefit from having these fears and living my life constantly terrified. I told myself I was worthless, not just not worth loving. I learned a lot of skills along the way, and I've made use of the mechanisms and strategies I've had to learn, but I didn't benefit per se in terms of, well, that was fun. But my mother, till the day she died, she was a good mother and she helped me a lot, but I took responsibility for her happiness. So do you see how it plays out? If I had been able to love myself better or knew that's what I was trying to do, I didn't know I didn't love myself, or that I didn't accept myself, or that I didn't even like myself. So if you question, well, how do I feel about myself? And start to look at it, and you'll get clues from the patterns in your life, particularly patterns of relationships. If they're difficult or if you're not happy, often it's because we're looking for love in all the wrong places. Where have you heard that before? And I would quote whoever said that, but I can't remember it. But it's true.
It's simple, but it's the most difficult thing to master, isn't it, Amanda? It's very easy to say love yourself, but it's a matter of the head and the heart piece. The head kicks in and brings about all of those belief systems that you develop to keep yourself safe. Why do you think it is that we don't question some of those belief systems earlier? Why do we wait for a crisis?
Because I don't think many people know about them. I mean, they're embedded by the time we're 7, and by then they're so deeply entrenched that you don't even know you have that belief. I wasn't conscious that I was taking responsibility for my mother, or why. I mean, I knew I looked after my mother. I just did. I didn't ever stop and think about it. Maybe just as we're talking now, reflecting on how you actually really feel about yourself. And do you like yourself? And do you ever think about what you want? Because a few times people have said to me, well, what do you want? And I sit there going, oh, oh, I don't know. And it took ages. And then Michelle had to say to me, well, just go for feelings. How do you want to feel? So I could do that. I'd like to feel peaceful. I'd like to feel centered and have moments of joy and feeling like I have a purpose and I'm on track and I'm aligned and I'm enjoying everything that's happening without judging it.
Mm.
So I could do that. So maybe start to think about, how much am I judging myself? Which of those core fears do I have? And how does that fear play out in my life? Because on the inside, you've got all this judgment going on that you've taken on board. So the first step on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 is I hate myself and 10 is I love myself. Where do I fit in? And then you could do the same thing maybe for a level of acceptance. Do you accept yourself with all the flaws? Like, people could listen to this and go, wow, she's a keynote speaker and she's talking to tens of thousands of people, around the world. But gosh, she's a fake because she's not even happy and she's talking about joy. Well, no, because I admit on stage, I know I'm speaking about joy, but we teach best most what we need to learn, as Lao Tzu said, another quote. And I think that's true. We do teach best what we most need to learn. But I also admit, look, I haven't mastered this yet, but I've made progress. And this is what I've learned. So just as I'm saying now, this is what I've learned about how you can move in the direction of loving yourself better, is to accept, first of all, so if I use me, accept that for a lot of people, I used to be too intense and too full on, and that would crush me. I would think, oh, well, never going to meet anybody. I'm too intense. So I would take on board what other people said. And it's really fairly recent, but it took a long time to go, well, no, I'm just becoming calmer and I'm getting better at observing others and not being driven by the need to fix people, because that was the other big thing that came from the core fears. It's my responsibility not just to keep my mother happy, but to keep everybody happy. And that means it's my job to fix everybody. So you can imagine how much my partners in life loved that, and every single person I knew. So looking at those things and giving myself a lot of grace. So give yourself a lot of grace too. You're doing the best you can. It's not like you wake up every morning and go, whoa, gee, how can I screw everything up today?
I think that's an interesting point there, Amanda. It's grace. There's a great piece around being okay with who we are, where we're at, even though we know that there's a lot we might uncover about ourselves that we haven't uncovered before. It's really interesting chatting to you, and I know we could go on forever, but I'm very aware of your time. There's some final wrap-up questions that Jo and I ask. So the first one is, knowing what you know now, what message would you give your 10-year-old self?
I would go back to the 4-year-old and say, you are so worth loving. And by the way, I didn't get a chance to say before, please, please, please talk to your children if you have young children or teenagers or old, just talk to your children about the 3 core fears and ask them which ones they have. Remind them they're just stories. Remind them that you actually do love them. And if you've got toddlers, it's really important you say the words, you are so worth loving. You are so good enough. You are safe. And you always belong here. You are always part of us. Sorry, I digressed. So to my 10-year-old, I would say, you are so worth loving. You are safe. And I've got you.
And the next question is, and you touched on it very early on, but I'd like you to restate it for us. What is the greatest gift that your experiences have given you?
I would say that it's closer to really knowing myself and who I really am.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it is huge, isn't it? Even as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, did I really? Have I? And I am. I am closer. I am much closer to it. And I'm very grateful. It was a shitty journey, but I'm very grateful.
Just on that point, because we often look at the challenges as being really difficult and we don't really want to go through them. So how would you frame it for people when they arise?
Well, again, this is not new, but it was reinforced in one of Paul Selig's books just a couple of weeks ago. The choice, and it's a choice, to see every problem, crisis, issue as an opportunity. And, I've heard that forever, and I've tried to do it. And when I'm in the middle of the crisis, I feel like telling somebody to go forth and multiply. Like, I'll piss off, see it as an opportunity. Yeah, no, I'm sobbing and rocking in the corner. But in a more sane moment, if I choose to stop, get out of my head where I'm going, oh my God, everything's going to die, the sky's going to fall in, and get into my heart where there's a little more wisdom and I can calm myself down, then I can go, step back. This is an opportunity, and not judge it and not say, oh, shut up to myself, but to actually start to look at the opportunity that there is within this mess. Because my pattern has been, I'd get into the crisis and I'm rocking in a corner and I have to go through all of that pain. And then when I come out the other end, I see, oh yeah, that was an opportunity. So I think it would be less painful if I saw the opportunity first.
Well, that's a trick, isn't it? With the old brain, it usually gets hijacked in the first instance and just goes into that fight-flight mode.
Yeah.
What would be the 3 top tips that you'd like to share today?
Well, I came up with this a month ago maybe, and I like to have like mnemonics or things that people can remember easily. So this was SOS.
Okay.
So when you're in either crisis mode or you start to notice the fears rising up, or you're anxious about going to talk to someone, or you're already talking to somebody and you go, that's when you go, SOS time. So the first S stands for stop and be still. And in a sense, step back. So start to look at the bigger picture. And then the O stands for observe. Observe the story you're telling yourself, because the way you're feeling, the thinking drives the feeling. So it's always going to be one of those fear-based stories that drives the feeling of anxious, unhappy, miserable, angry, frustrated. Name the feeling, there's a thought that's triggering it. And so observe the thought, and if you like, observe the opportunity and open your heart. And then the third is to start breathing, because most of us, the second we get stressed, stop breathing. We breathe very high and shallow, and that stops the oxygen going to the brain. So start breathing, start a new story. So instead of the old story, I'm not worth loving, I'm not good enough, I suck, start a new story. And you don't have to go straight to, I'm an astonishing being of light, because that's a bit of a jump for most people. But you can go, you know what, I'm doing my best right now. I'm doing the best I can with all the skills and resources I've got. I need to just breathe and work my way through it. So you can start a new story. And if you're really stressed, you're already disconnected. You're not present. You've gone, boom, back to the past. And you're the toddler. If you do the SOS technique, it doesn't take long. It's a few nanoseconds. And you breathe, it'll bring you back into your body, into the present, and you can start to focus not on you being triggered by something that sends you to the past.
Tips, and they're very doable tips too, Amanda, which I think is fantastic.
Well, people won't do anything that's incredibly complex unless they're really motivated to do it. So when you're listening to a podcast, either there's a story that inspires you to do something differently, or it's just the perfect timing for you to hear something. If you get something simple that's easy to remember, you're more likely to do it. And if people are miserable enough, they will do it.
Wouldn't it be a delightful world one day if we could go to a space where we didn't have to have crisis to take action?
Wouldn't it be a great thing? And that's actually a good thing to end with, Anne, because making conscious choices, 95 to 99% of the time, we're literally unconscious of everything we're thinking. So if you become an observer of your thinking, you'll start to make conscious choices, because we're making choices and decisions every day, every second. I mean, once you become conscious, you start to make conscious choices. So if you leave this today with a decision to become more conscious and more consciously create elements in your life that you want more of. You know, lots of people say, we create our lives, and we're kind of creating it all the time. But every time somebody says that to me, I still go cringe, because I think, oh, God, I'm not doing a very good job of creating the life I want, am I? Because sometimes I think when people talk to you about create the life you want, it's taking you out of the present into a future kind of a goal thing. I'm in the process of learning, if I stay present and I keep working on myself and I keep being in my heart, things will unfold in the way that they're meant to, rather than me pushing it. This is how I'd like to feel. And how that specifically looks, I'm working on leaving up to a greater wisdom than I have, or my soul's wisdom.
To me, you've just stated that whole piece around grace, grace with self, grace with life, grace with how we live.
Yeah.
And
And that's a beautiful way to end it, Anne.
Well, Amanda, it has been such an enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much for joining Jo and I today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. Thanks for letting me rabbit on for so long.
It's all good stuff. Thanks, Amanda.
Oh, great. Thank you both.
Okay, that's our episode for today of What's Fear Got to Do with It. Thanks so much for your company. We hope you found it insightful and it left you with some helpful tips from our guests and some great points for you to reflect on. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Substack or follow us on your favourite platform. Leave a review. We'd love to know your thoughts. Maybe you'd like to be a guest, or you know someone who you would like to hear their story. Reach out to us on Insta at whatsfear_podcast or email us at info@whatsfear.com. All the guests' show notes are below to find their tips. And until next time, from Jo and I, take care, stay curious, and keep the conversation going.